Hi, I'm Tom Henriksen from the DevOps Online Summit. Today I'm joined by Gautham Pallapa. He is a founder, author, and a keynote speaker. Gautham, introduce yourself to the people here at the DevOps Online Summit.
Thank you for having me, Tom, and hello, everyone. I'm a founder of Transformity. It's a think tank that's focusing on how to transform enterprises and people with empathy. Empathy is a big driver of everything that I do. And so Transformity has been a wonderful avenue and an instrument to drive that. I also talk a lot about empathy and working with people and trying to improve their lives. And I'm an executive advisor at VMware, where I tie in with enterprises that are on their cloud native journey or their business transformation journey and help them modernize things, but not just from a technology perspective, but more from a cultural, a people, and a process perspective. Because technology can only be an accelerator. What you really need to work on, and the more difficult parts are those non-discrete, non-deterministic things that are processes and humans. So that's something that I've been doing, and over the last 18 months, it's as you all can imagine, it's drastically changed. The complexities have increased, especially with remote workforce, hybrid areas of working, and there were a couple of insights and observations that we found. And Tom and we thought that this would be a really good place to talk about those and have a dialogue about this and be sensitive to them.
Yeah. So today, the session title that we're working on here at Gautham is Upholding Organization Culture Through Secure Software Supply Chain. So that's a mouthful, but why don't you explain what it means to you, Gautham?
Yeah, so let's break it down, right? An organization's culture, if you really think about it, it defines the behavior, the interactions, and the value generation that you have within the organization. It mostly starts with the vision and the mission. It has the founders and the leaders' shared beliefs and values that are communicated and reinforced through various methods. Ultimately, that shapes your employees' perceptions, their understandings, and their behaviors. In the past, this was traditionally done through town halls. You had corporate events, you had hallways, and you had posters in the hallways, in the various conference rooms, and in break rooms. Your different tchotchkes on your desk, and that were constant reminders of the organization and its culture. And you had newsletters. But in a remote world, all that is not possible, right? I mean, you hardly get to go into the office, and even if you do, you probably won't meet everyone out there. It's impossible to have like a town hall. And with the way things have happened over the last 18 months, organizations have been hiring a lot of people. And now all these new people have never met their teammates. They probably have never even met physically their supervisors, and it's all digital. So how do you drive the behavior and interactions and generation of value, like the purpose of your organization? And what we've started observing as we're interacting with all these companies is we've started seeing that the processes and the technology tool chain, so to speak, that is helping the new hires and the people within the organization focus on why they exist and why the organization exists overall, is driving the behavior. So the first thing we feel is the organizations must know the why. They must know why they actually exist. Yeah. What is the value that they're providing to the customer, right? And that has to be promoted through business and IT alignment within the organization. That's the purpose of the org. And that usually used to be through the mission and vision and the business outcomes that the organization used to have. The next thing is how to make sure that this value can flow within your organization as easily and quickly as possible with the least amount of friction, and not have that siloed approach that a lot of organizations have. And that's where we've observed, especially when you're deploying applications in the software space, that having that secure software supply chain is really important. It shapes the behavior of your organization and the people that are generating value.
Yeah. Now you touched on a lot of things. I like how you started kind of with why, and that's so important. I think a lot of times especially myself and a lot of us tech people, we don't really care about that sometimes, and it can kind of gunk things up as we get along in an organization if we don't understand that. But you also talked about that value flow is so important as we come through, and you mentioned how we don't want to have those silos. Talk to us how important that is, that we need to remove those silos and get everybody working together to get that value flow through the organization, Gautham.
Yeah, definitely. So the purpose of an organization is to make sure that whatever you have as a concept or an idea is consumed by the customer in a particular way, and it delivers either delight to the customer, or it improves or delivers some value to the organization. It could be monetary in the form of ROI or revenue for the customers, sales, subscription, you name it. Or it could just be brand awareness and brand recognition, right? The reputation of an organization is also value. Now, when you're deploying value through the organization and you're pushing all of these through, let's assume that you have all these checkpoints or gates where you are stopping the flow of value and moving it as quickly as possible, and that's a very waterfall approach. And that introduces so much of friction and so much of impact to the value that sometimes by the time you're actually deploying into production, it may not be valuable anymore. So let's take shelter in place that we had last March.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone who's working in essential retail, right? They had to make sure that their e-commerce sites were really accurate, that their inventory was up to date, that they were able to fulfill orders as quickly as possible and deliver them. So that means you have a lot of transactions that are going in. Your platform needed to grow. It needed to deliver value to the customer because and Experian had this particular survey where it said that if a customer did not complete a transaction within 34 seconds or get a response, so let's say you're searching for an ingredient or some kind of a thing in the inventory, and your search engine doesn't respond back in 34 seconds, they abandon and go to the competitor. So that means true value is being left on the table. And so you want to make sure that friction to deliver value is as low as possible. And this is why concepts like agility and lean experimentation and DevOps practices, especially the automation portion of things, is so important. And that brought about this entire concept of a software supply chain.
Yeah.
You want to reduce the number of touch points that you have. The developers must focus on their high value activity, which is developing code and features. And the operators need to focus on their high value activity, which is making sure that the platform is running smoothly, the website is proper, it's resilient, it's scalable, all those various things. You don't want them to focus on the mundane aspects or the painful aspects of stringing everything together and driving it, because that makes behavior very different. You're starting to become a waterfall shop rather than being agile. So even though you're going through the ceremonies, what you truly are doing is a water scrum fall or a scrum barn approach. And that's not reality. I mean, you are the sum total of your weakest link. Yeah. And that's why it's so important to have that software approach to improve the flow and modernize the flow within the organization. And that drives behavior. And that's why GitOps and all these other pipeline approaches and software supply chains has been such a breath of fresh air, especially when you have to deploy things as quickly as possible and innovate.
Yeah. Now, you talked earlier, Gautham, about that culture, and then we also talked a little bit about that kind of supply chain and software pipeline. How do we work those two together? Because in some ways they seem like they're really far apart, but they're not really, right?
Yeah, of course. So at the end of the day, it goes to the why. Why are you performing the activities that you're doing? That's the purpose. You need to understand the purpose of everything that you do. What value are you adding within your organization or within the working software that you're deploying or delivering, right? For example, those are, in my mind, the norms of the organization that you're building. And the working software are the artifacts that you're creating, right? So you need to find a way where you are promoting this value through the organization and you are having the right behaviors to do it. So,
Mhm.
for example, um, until ransomware and all these small actors and all that, security was always, afterthought in a number of these deployment chains. It always was that okay, you have development, then you have design, development, testing, and then afterwards, just before they go into production, you're like, wait a minute, we don't have that checkbox filled. So they just throw it over the wall to security and say, all right, we need you to push this as soon as possible because the customer wants it, right? It's always an afterthought. But now things have flipped. You want security has become a class one citizen, and it is not an afterthought anymore. It's
Yeah.
baked in. So that means we've started changing the values and we've changed the behaviors of our people through technology. And
Mhm.
the way we've done it is we have reduced the barrier of friction to introduce security. You have very powerful tools in our toolchain now that automatically keep scanning and securing and signing all your build images and your build packs and so on. So that's become something that we have done. So we've started changing the behavior there.
Mhm.
As we start stringing them along, the other thing that we've done is we've invested more into automation and reducing that manual toil. So deploying multiple times into an environment is not that painful anymore. You
Mhm.
don't have to play that, what do you call it, deployment Tetris or release management Tetris to slot something in.
Yeah.
You can deploy as quickly as possible. You find it doesn't work properly, you can easily roll it back because you have already captured the previous state.
Mhm.
You roll forward if needed, if it's a small fix. So that has become really, really valuable for us.
Yeah.
The third thing that we've done, especially because we've gone remote and we've gone in a hybrid work model, is our communication tools and technologies have also improved.
Mhm.
Asynchronous communication has become so important right now, and you know, uh, over the last 18 months, I think a lot of organizations have realized that some of the communication technology or the technologies that they use, they don't interface or integrate well with their existing toolchain.
Yeah.
And so they've started to improve upon them, bring in that digital twin of the physical experience, is what I call it. So they're trying to make sure that people are not stressed or frustrated trying to even use the tool, because if they're not in communication with the organization, they're on an island, metaphorically and physically speaking, and we don't want them to feel isolated. So promoting that, having better tools, making them more real time and persistent, having a better UI, all these various things has started driving towards this GitOps approach, this DevSecOps approach, all the chat ops, AI ops. You can go with any X ops. And it's been driving our behavior, our fundamental behavior in a better way, because at the end of the day, the customer doesn't have the patience. They
No.
want instant gratification. And that is the why that is driving all of these
Mhm. Yeah. We all want instant gratification, don't we, Gautham?
things.
I want it now. So I want to touch on something though quickly, Gautham. That you brought up that asynchronous communication and how important that is, and how we need to kind of have our tools enabled to do that. But especially as you mentioned, in where our current remote, as we've kind of gone through this pandemic, that became more important, I guess. So talk to us how we can leverage asynchronous communication and how. I mean, it's kind of a different shift, really. I'm guessing a mindset shift to kind of understand that too, right?
It is. So there's a lot of complexity. And I actually talk about this called the work complication that we brought upon ourselves. We started obsessing over the customer. We started focusing on business outcomes and value. And in order to make sure that we're delivering the value, we wanted to make people become so productive. And they brought in all the newer technologies and all those various things. But because we want to ensure that remote people are being productive, we introduced newer processes, newer checkpoints. We had an explosion of meetings. I don't know about you, but I'm like double or triple booked. almost consistently,
Yeah.
right? Every day.
Mhm.
And I conducted a survey last year, and there's a lot of results that are posted online, but it's really depressing that more than 65% of the people responded that they were at least double or triple booked at least once a week. So those processes came about because we just don't want productivity, we want accountability. And because we want accountability to drive that value, you have governance processes in place. We have meetings in place. We have responses. We have meetings for to prep for meetings. All those various crazy things.
Yeah.
Now add the complexity of different time zones, people all over the place in different geos, life happening for them in real time,
Mhm.
and it's just becoming so complicated. So it's very hard to have synchronous communication anymore.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing in my mind because we are evolving to elevate the way in which we converse or communicate with people. We're using much more asynchronous communication to make decisions. We're using asynchronous communications to do like Roman voting. You put a poll out there, and then you ask, do you want to do this or do you want to do the other thing? And then people vote, and immediately you know what the result is. You don't need to have a meeting for the sake of that decision. That's really helping people. A lot of these asynchronous communication devices, messaging clients now, they store the history. So you
Ah.
have a lot of learning, a lot of failures.
Mhm.
You know what the outcome was that you were looking at. You
Mhm.
can go back to it. And then if you're doing things like retros in a team event, the tools have evolved in such a way that you can automatically even right click on a particular insight that you got from a retro and convert it into an action item and assign it automatically to people.
Wow.
That level of asynchronous communication and integration has really, really helped in this remote world. And again, it's driving organizational behavior. Accountability increases, governance, while the governance has become much more leaner, there still is governance, but it's become much more self induced governance because you know if it's assigned to you, you are going to do it. And then the number of processes, we still have work to do in that realm where we want to feel comfortable to empower people and enable them to just focus on value activities and have them do it. So, yeah, those are some of the things that we have observed from an asynchronous communication perspective that have really shifted and changed.
Yeah. Well, Gautham, you've shared a lot with us. Any closing thoughts?
I think we're in a very exciting time. Organizations are evolving. Almost every organization today is going through some form of transformation,
Mhm.
be it organizational restructuring, bringing in new talent, trying to evolve their culture through acquiring or merging or any of these. We are at a really, really wonderful time of evolution. And I think what we need to focus on is we need to make sure that we understand the why we are trying to do it. We also want to be very empathic to the workforce, not just our customers, because customer empathy is there a lot. We also want to focus on internally on employee and enterprise empathy and try to reduce that pain and manual toil. And the only way that we can do it is through having the right technology or the right secure supply chain that will drive the behavior to deliver, especially if you're in a software world.
Well,
So
Gautham, we appreciate it so much. Thank you for coming on.
thank you for having me, Tom.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. On behalf of Gautham Pallapa, I am Tom Hendrickson for the DevOps Online Summit.